In the autumn of 1941, the Germans began construction of a concentration camp on the eastern outskirts of Lublin. In less than 3 years, this camp would become the place of internment for 150,000 people from approximately 30 countries. 80,000 of those perished in this camp. This monument is where the main entrance to the camp was. The concentration camp at Lublin, known as Majdanek, was the first in Poland to be liberated by the Russians. Because of this, and the ineptitude of the camp leader, most of the camp survived. Unlike Auschwitz, where the Germans had time to hide their crimes by blowing up the gas chambers and the crematorium, it's all still here. The Majdanek concentration camp is also the first camp to become a state museum. The museum was actually set up before the end of World War II. So the little White House was actually here before the construction of the camp. It used to be the home of the city dog catcher. During the camp's existence, it was the home of the SS physician. What is interesting about this camp is how housing estates are literally built right next to it. People's gardens actually come right to the camp fence, and you see people walking through using the camp as a shortcut. So originally the victims' corpses were buried in mass graves. From 1942 the crematorium was used, and from 1943, because of the sheer numbers, they were burnt on funeral pyres, 100 people at a time. So upon arrival at the camp, prisoners would be sent to these two barracks. These are the bathhouses. This is the men's and this is the women's over there. They would be stripped, their clothes and valuables would be taken from them, and they would have to wait in this room, sometimes up to 700 people at a time, waiting to be called to go into the next room where they would have their entire body hair removed. Removing their hair was a way of stigmatising the prisoners, but also the hair was used as materials for producing industrial felt and yarn. These concrete tubs would be filled with disinfectant, so as the prisoners came through, they would have to immerse themselves into these tubs and then get out and move through this room here, where they would be hastily bathed. So this was the dressing room, and what the Nazis used to do was put all the clothes on the floor and put Zyklon B on the floor and heat up the room, and the gases from the Zyklon B would kill any lice, and the gases would be released through these ventilation. These are the canisters of Zyklon B. Of course, we know that they were used for an altogether different purpose. Once everyone had registered and gone through the procedure of the bathhouse, the remaining prisoners would be brought here. They would be stripped, brought into this room. Zyklon B would be dropped. Prisoners said they heard screaming for about 5 minutes, And then the screaming stopped. So this is the women's bathhouse, and all the women would come in here, and this would be where they had to remove their clothes and any valuables before moving on to the second part of the whole procedure, which was the shower room. And here they were subjected to incredible humiliation. Their genitalia would be disinfected, and this is where selections would take place. There would be an SS doctor in here who would decide which of the prisoners would be sent straight to the gas chambers. Approximately 70% of all the women that arrived at this camp were sent directly to the gas chambers. And these rooms would be where they used to disinfect the clothes. This area here is what's known as the Rose Garden, and this is where a lot of the selections would also take place. So people arriving from other camps and the ghetto in Lublin, Polish prisoners of war, Russian prisoners of war, they would all arrive here. This is where selection would take place. This is often where families were broken up, where the young would be sent off to work in the labour camp, and the old and less fit would be sent directly to the gas chambers. These rollers were used for levelling roads, and they would be pulled by the prisoners. It was the most exhausting work in the camp. When you think that these people had barely any food, these people were sick, having to pull these things. So in this barrack it gives you information about some of the other smaller camps that were in Lublin at the time. The first one being in Pulver Street, which is in the centre of Lublin. And the people who were held prisoner there were kind of focused on carpentry skills. And in November 1943, the 2,000 prisoners were brought here and shot in a mass execution. At the beginning of 1944, the activity in the camp resumed. Specialists of different professions were brought here until the 22nd of July 1944, when they were evacuated to Auschwitz. And now it's a shopping mall. So this was a camp called Commando Sportsplatz, and basically all the Jews living here, their job was to level the Jewish cemetery and to build a sports stadium for the SS. And this one is Flukplatz, which was a camp mainly for Jews who would sort clothing that had been plundered from other Jews. Barrack number 47, it's an artistic installation paying tribute to the anonymous victims of Majdanek.
I prosty nam dołby nasi, jak i my proszczajemy dłużnikom naszym. I nadwedy nas u skupusu, a i zbawi nas від лукавого.
Majdanek was also a place for storing the shoes of victims from other camps. Shoes were searched for hidden valuables, and they were sent back to Germany to be used by civilians, and some of them were used as raw materials. But when the camp was liberated, they found 430,000 pairs of shoes. This was the male prisoners' field. And You can see there's not much left of this, but you can see where the barracks used to be. You can see the base of the barracks. These are the prisoners' barracks that were originally designed for 250 prisoners at a time, but often the numbers would rise to up to 500. And when the camp was first established, there was nothing. People basically slept on straw on the floor or wooden shavings. It was only in 1942 that these three-tiered beds were introduced. At 4 AM every morning, the prisoners would have to leave the barracks for roll call. Now, sometimes during the winter, the temperatures would be way below zero, and they'd have to stand and wait until the SS had counted every single person in their barrack and made sure that it matched the lists that they had. If it didn't, then the leader of the barrack would be beaten, and the barracks would be turned upside down until eventually, more often than not, they'd find who they were looking for hiding under a sheet or something, trying to escape the harsh freezing temperatures of the roll call. This monument was erected by Polish political prisoners in 1943 while the camp was still active, on order by the camp officials. Prisoners placed some of the victims' ashes at the base of the monument, making it the first memorial to the victims of the camp. Surrounding the entire camp and also separating the different sections of the camp, you have these two barbed wire fences connected to a high voltage, so if you touched these then you would have been immediately killed. The camp's also surrounded by 18 watchtowers, which would have had armed guards and spotlights, searchlights for 24 hours. So escape was pretty much impossible, but some people did manage it. News of any escape was always greeted with jubilation from the other inmates of the camp. This is what's known as Field 5, and between 1942 and 1943 this was a women's camp. And just to our left, just here, were two barracks where children would stay, but they were only ever there for a short time, because the reason why they were in these barracks was because it was close to the gas chamber, and children, frail people and old people were always sent to the gas chambers. So just these two barracks over here would just hold children until the gas chambers were ready for them. So before being cremated, each body would be searched for valuables, gold teeth, that kind of thing. So this here is part of the chassis from a lorry, which was used as the base to pile up bodies ready for burning. And this is a furnace from the crematorium, situated in Field 1, the very first field that we explored. Around 100 corpses a day were burnt in that field. And that's a lorry crate which was used to carry corpses. On November the 3rd, 1943, over 18,000 Jews were executed on this spot. And it's when you see something like this, similar to the exhibitions in Auschwitz with the human hair or the shoes, it just brings it home, the sheer scale of what happened here. 80,000 people were murdered in this place, whether they were sent to the gas chambers or whether they died of disease or starvation. It was murder. And this reads, "Our fate for you," as a warning.